Most people believe they're broke because life is expensive, because salaries are unfair, or because the system is rigged. Financial experts say those explanations feel comforting, but they're rarely true. In reality, millions of people with stable incomes, good jobs, and real opportunities stay broke for decades, not because of bad luck, but because of small financial decisions they repeat every day without ever questioning them. This isn't a motivational talk, and it isn't about working harder. It's about the quiet habits, the invisible choices, and the expert-backed reasons why most people stay broke, even when they shouldn't. Most people believe income is the problem. They believe that if they earned a little more, life would finally feel stable. Bills would stop feeling heavy. Savings would start growing. Stress would quietly disappear. Financial experts say this belief is understandable, but they also say it's one of the most misleading ideas in modern personal finance, because income, on its own, has very little to do with wealth. What actually matters is what happens after the money arrives. Across decades of financial research, one pattern appears again and again. As income rises, spending rises with it, often at the same pace. This phenomenon has a name. Experts call it lifestyle inflation, but calling it inflation makes it sound dramatic. In reality, it happens quietly. A raise arrives, a bonus hits the account, a new job pays more than the last one. And nothing changes except expectations. Suddenly, the old apartment feels temporary, the old car feels outdated, the old habits feel unnecessary. None of these changes feel reckless. They feel logical. Earn more, live better. Financial experts don't criticize this instinct. They understand it, but they warn that this is where most financial progress quietly ends. Because when income and lifestyle rise together, wealth stays exactly where it is, at zero. Experts often point out a counterintuitive truth. Many people with high incomes feel just as financially stressed as people earning far less. They earn more, but they also owe more. They spend more, but they save the same or less. They upgrade comfort, but not security. This is why surveys repeatedly show something surprising. A large percentage of high earners still live paycheck to paycheck, not because they're irresponsible, not because they lack intelligence, but because they were taught that earning money is the finish line. It isn't. Earning money is simply the starting point. Financial experts often separate people into two groups: those who ask, "How much can I afford?" and those who ask, "How much should I keep?" At first, these questions sound similar. They aren't. The first question leads to consumption. The second leads to control. When someone asks how much they can afford, they naturally push spending to the edge of their income. They maximize comfort. They minimize friction. When someone asks how much they should keep, spending becomes secondary. Savings become automatic. Lifestyle becomes intentional. This single difference, experts say, explains why two people with identical incomes can end up in completely different financial realities. One builds resilience, the other builds obligations. Another illusion experts warn about is the belief that financial discipline becomes easier with more money. It doesn't. In fact, higher income often creates more pressure to spend, not less. Social expectations change. Professional environments change. Peer comparisons intensify. A certain lifestyle becomes part of your identity, and once lifestyle becomes identity, reducing it feels like failure, even when it's financially necessary. Experts say this is why many people feel trapped at higher income levels. They earn well, but they feel unable to slow down. They can't step back. They can't downsize. They can't pause. Not because they lack options, but because their lifestyle has become fixed. Income rises, freedom shrinks. One of the most uncomfortable insights financial experts share is this: most people don't use extra income to buy freedom. They use it to buy reassurance. Reassurance that they're doing well. Reassurance that they're progressing. Reassurance that they're successful. but reassurance fades quickly. A nicer apartment becomes normal. A better car becomes expected. Convenience becomes default, and soon the same anxiety returns, just at a higher cost. Experts say this cycle is why many people feel permanently behind, no matter how much they earn. Because they're chasing a feeling that spending can never permanently provide. Wealthy individuals, by contrast, tend to treat income very differently, not because they're smarter, not because they're luckier, but because they separate earning from ownership. Financial experts observe that wealthy people often decide what portion of income they will never see. It's invested, protected, removed from daily decision-making. What remains becomes the lifestyle budget. This approach reverses the usual formula. Instead of spending first and saving what's left, they save first and design life around what remains. It's not dramatic. It's not extreme. It's quiet. And that quiet decision compounds over time. Experts also emphasize that wealth is built more by consistency than by intensity. Not one big raise, not one perfect year, but thousands of small decisions repeated over decades. The problem is that small decisions don't feel important. Skipping savings 1 month doesn't feel dangerous. Upgrading lifestyle slightly doesn't feel destructive. Delaying investment until things stabilize feels responsible. But repeated over years, these decisions lock people into a financial ceiling. Experts call this the income illusion, the belief that progress comes from earning more rather than managing better. As long as someone believes income is the solution, they postpone responsibility. They wait for the next raise, the next opportunity, the next breakthrough, and while they wait, time passes. One of the clearest findings in financial research is this: people who build wealth tend to behave the same way at every income level. They save when they earn little. They save when they earn more. They save when it feels inconvenient. People who stay broke behave the same way too. They spend first. They justify later. They promise to change once things improve. Experts say this consistency, not income, predicts long-term outcomes more accurately than almost any other factor. Perhaps the most difficult truth experts share is that most people don't have an income problem. They have a structure problem. No systems, no automation, no separation between money meant for today and money meant for the future. Everything lives in one account. Everything feels available. Everything gets touched. Wealth, by contrast, requires distance. Distance between income and spending. Distance between impulse and access. Distance between lifestyle and net worth. Without that distance, money disappears quietly, no matter how much arrives. Financial experts often say this: if more money automatically created wealth, high earners would never struggle. But struggle exists at every income level. Because wealth is not built by earning more, it's built by deciding differently. And until that decision is made, income simply raises the volume, not the outcome. This is why so many people feel stuck despite progress. They run faster. They earn more, they upgrade everything. Yet financially, they remain in the same place. Understanding the income illusion is uncomfortable because it removes a comforting excuse. It means the problem isn't just external. It isn't only the economy. It isn't entirely unfair systems. It's also daily behavior, and that realization is where real change begins. Because once income stops being the hero of the story, something else takes its place. Control, and control, experts agree, is where wealth actually starts. After income, the next invisible force that keeps people broke is comfort, not recklessness, not ignorance, comfort. Financial experts often say that comfort is one of the most expensive habits a person can develop, not because it's wrong, but because it's rarely questioned. Comfort doesn't arrive suddenly. It grows slowly, quietly, almost politely. It shows up as convenience, as efficiency, as rewards for working hard, and because it feels earned, it feels safe. That's why experts call it a trap. Most people imagine financial traps as obvious mistakes, bad investments, risky decisions, overspending, but the comfort trap doesn't look like any of those. It looks like food delivered instead of cooked. It looks like subscriptions that save time. It looks like paying more to avoid inconvenience. None of these choices feel harmful on their own. In fact, each one feels rational. Experts emphasize that the danger isn't in any single decision. It's in the pattern they create. Comfort changes how people think about money. Instead of asking, "Is this necessary?" they ask, "Is this worth it?" And worth it becomes a flexible word. Worth it for stress relief, worth it for productivity, worth it for mental health, worth it because life is busy. Financial experts don't dismiss these reasons. They acknowledge that time and energy matter. But they also warn that comfort spending has a unique property. It doesn't feel like spending. It feels like optimization. One of the clearest signs of the comfort trap is the disappearance of friction. Friction is the small resistance that forces decisions. Cooking takes effort. Canceling a subscription takes effort. Comparing prices takes effort. Comfort removes that effort. With one click, a meal arrives. With auto-renewal, payments disappear in the background. With saved cards, spending becomes instant. Experts point out that when friction disappears, awareness disappears with it. Money leaves quietly. And quiet losses are the hardest to notice. Another reason comfort is so powerful is that it scales with income. As people earn more, comfort options multiply. More delivery, more services, more upgrades. At higher income levels, people stop paying for products and start paying for avoidance. Avoiding effort, avoiding waiting, avoiding inconvenience, avoiding discomfort. Experts say this shift is subtle but critical. Because once spending becomes about avoidance, it expands endlessly. There is always something else you can avoid. Comfort also reshapes identity. People don't just use convenience, they come to expect it. Waiting feels inefficient. Doing things manually feels unnecessary. Cheaper options feel inferior. At this point, comfort is no longer a choice. It's a standard, and lowering that standard feels like moving backward. Experts note that this is where many people feel stuck. They could save more, they could simplify, but doing so feels like loss, even when it improves their financial future. One of the most uncomfortable truths experts share is this: comfort often delays growth. When life becomes too smooth, urgency disappears. There's no pressure to optimize finances, no reason to build buffers, no motivation to question habits. As long as things feel fine, people assume they are fine, but fine is a dangerous place to stay, because financial damage rarely happens during crisis. It happens during comfort. Experts often explain this using a simple observation. People don't change when things are bad. They change when things become uncomfortable, but comfort eliminates discomfort. So change never arrives. Subscriptions renew. Bills get paid. Income covers expenses, and years pass. Another aspect of the comfort trap is what experts call microleakage. Small amounts leaving constantly, not large enough to trigger alarm, not painful enough to feel urgent, but persistent. Streaming services, cloud storage, premium apps, upgraded plans, each one feels insignificant. Together, they form a permanent drain. Experts say microleakage is dangerous because it becomes normalized. People stop seeing these expenses as choices. They see them as part of life. Comfort also changes how people justify spending. Instead of pleasure, the justification becomes necessity. I need this to function. I don't have time not to. This helps me stay productive. Experts warn that once spending is justified as necessity, it becomes immune to scrutiny. No one questions necessities. And so comfort spending becomes permanent. Wealthy individuals, according to financial experts, treat comfort very differently. They don't eliminate it. They control it. They are selective about where comfort matters and where it doesn't. They might spend heavily to save time in one area and accept inconvenience in others. This selectivity is critical because it preserves awareness. Experts observe that wealthy people often keep friction in their lives on purpose. They cook when it's easy, they review expenses regularly, they question renewals, not because they enjoy inconvenience, but because friction keeps decisions visible. Another insight experts share is that comfort often replaces planning. Instead of designing systems, people buy solutions. Instead of building routines, they outsource effort. Instead of learning, they pay to avoid learning. This creates dependency, and dependency increases costs over time. Experts say this is why people who rely heavily on convenience often feel financially fragile. If income drops, comfort collapses, and suddenly, expenses feel overwhelming. Comfort also distorts perception of value. When people pay to avoid inconvenience, they stop valuing effort. Cooking feels expensive because it costs time. Cleaning feels inefficient because it costs energy. Experts say this mindset makes saving feel like sacrifice. But wealthy individuals often reverse this thinking. They see effort as leverage. Time invested now reduces costs later, and that trade-off compounds. One of the clearest differences experts observe between wealthy and struggling individuals is tolerance for mild discomfort. Wealthy people tolerate small inconveniences to protect long-term freedom. Others avoid discomfort to protect short-term comfort. Neither choice feels dramatic, but over time, they lead to very different outcomes. Experts also point out that comfort spending often hides emotional decisions. Stress, fatigue, burnout. When people are overwhelmed, convenience becomes coping. Order food, upgrade services, pay for ease. Experts emphasize that this isn't weakness, it's human. But without awareness, it becomes a pattern, and patterns shape finances more than intentions ever do. The comfort trap is especially powerful because it never feels urgent. There is no breaking point, no warning sign. Money just stops accumulating. Savings plateau, investments stall, options narrow, and because life feels manageable, people assume everything is fine. Experts warn that this is when the most damage happens. Breaking the comfort trap doesn't require rejecting modern life. It requires awareness, knowing which comforts genuinely improve life and which quietly drain it. Experts suggest a simple but powerful shift. Instead of asking, "Does this make life easier?" ask, "Does this move me closer to freedom?" If the answer is no, comfort may be costing more than it gives. Experts agree that wealth is rarely lost through one bad decision. It's lost through thousands of comfortable ones, decisions that feel harmless, decisions that feel deserved, decisions that never feel urgent enough to change until time runs out. Understanding the comfort trap is uncomfortable because it reveals that many financial limits are self-reinforced, not through failure, but through ease. And once this is seen, comfort is never invisible again. Which is exactly where control begins. One of the most common beliefs about money is also one of the most limiting. That belief is simple: time equals money. Financial experts say this idea is not entirely wrong, but it's deeply incomplete. Because while time can produce income, income alone does not produce wealth. And confusing the two is one of the main reasons people work harder every year, yet feel no closer to financial freedom. Most people are taught to sell time. You show up, you perform a task, you get paid. At first, this feels fair, logical, predictable, and early on it works. Income arrives regularly, bills get paid, life feels stable. But experts say stability can quietly become a ceiling. Because when income depends entirely on time, growth becomes limited by hours. There are only so many hours in a day, only so much energy in a week, only so many productive years in a lifetime. At some point, effort stops scaling. Financial experts call this the time-income trap. The more time someone trades for money, the more dependent they become on staying active, available, and healthy. Miss time, lose income. Pause, fall behind. Slow down, feel financial pressure. This is why so many hardworking people feel anxious even when they earn well. Their income is fragile, not because they're bad with money, but because it stops the moment they do. One of the biggest misunderstandings experts point out is how people define productivity. Most people equate productivity with busyness, long hours, full schedules, constant motion. But busyness doesn't always create value. Experts emphasize that wealth grows when value scales, not when effort increases. An effort tied directly to time rarely scales. This misunderstanding shapes career decisions. People chase promotions that demand more hours, more responsibility, more availability. Income rises, but so does dependency. Experts say this creates a dangerous illusion of progress. More money comes in. But freedom moves further away, because now there is more to maintain, more expenses, more obligations, more expectations. Time becomes more valuable, but also more scarce. Another reason the time misunderstanding persists is because it feels responsible. Working hard is praised. Being busy is admired. Rest is often framed as laziness. Experts don't criticize work ethic. They warn against confusing effort with leverage. Effort creates income. Leverage creates wealth. And leverage rarely comes from more hours. Wealthy individuals, experts observe, think about time differently. They don't ask, how much can I earn this year? They ask, how can I decouple income from my time? This doesn't mean they don't work. It means they work to build systems, not schedules. They build assets that continue functioning without constant attention, not overnight, not easily, but intentionally. Experts often describe wealth as stored time. Money saved and invested represents hours already worked, preserved for future use. When money is spent immediately, time is consumed and gone. When money is saved or invested, time is captured. This is why experts say saving is not about deprivation. It's about preserving future freedom. The time misunderstanding also affects how people think about opportunity. Many people reject opportunities that don't pay immediately. Learning, skill building, long-term projects. If time isn't instantly rewarded, it feels wasted. Experts say this short-term thinking keeps people locked into hourly or salaried ceilings, because leverage often pays later, not now. Another hidden aspect of the time misunderstanding is how people underestimate compounding. Compounding doesn't reward effort, it rewards patience. Small amounts invested early outperform large amounts invested late. Experts emphasize that this has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with when time is allowed to work. People who delay investing because they're not earning enough yet often lose the most valuable resource they have, time itself. Financial experts often highlight a painful contrast. Two people work equally hard. One spends most of what they earn. The other saves and invests a portion consistently. Years later, the outcomes look unrelated. One still depends on work. The other has options. Not because one worked harder, because one let time work longer. The time misunderstanding also explains why burnout is so common. When income requires constant effort, rest feels risky, vacations feel expensive, breaks feel irresponsible. Experts say this creates a cycle. Fatigue leads to convenience spending. Convenience increases expenses. Expenses increase dependence on work. Time gets squeezed from both ends. Wealthy individuals, according to experts, reverse this cycle. They protect time first. They design finances to reduce pressure, not increase it. They value free time not as luxury, but as strategy, because time creates clarity. And clarity improves decisions. Another expert insight is that people often misuse their highest energy hours. They spend peak mental energy maintaining income instead of building leverage, emails, meetings, tasks that reset daily. Experts say this keeps people productive but stagnant. Leverage building activities often feel slower and less urgent. Learning, planning, creating systems, these don't provide immediate feedback, which is why they're often postponed. Experts also warn about a subtle trap. As income grows, people often trade time for money at a higher rate instead of reducing time dependency. Longer hours, more responsibility, always-on availability. This feels like progress, but it increases fragility. If income requires constant presence, it's vulnerable. True wealth reduces required presence over time. The time misunderstanding is reinforced by society. Most systems reward attendance, not ownership. You're paid for showing up, not for building something that lasts. Experts say this is why financial education feels disconnected from real life. It teaches earning, not leverage. Breaking the time misunderstanding doesn't require quitting work. It requires redefining the goal. The goal is not maximum income. The goal is minimum required effort. Not today, but eventually. Every decision should move in that direction. Experts suggest a simple reframing. Instead of asking, how can I earn more? Ask, how can I make my income less dependent on my time? The answer changes everything. It changes what you learn, what you save, what you build. One of the most powerful expert observations is this: people who escape financial stress usually do it quietly. They don't announce it. They don't rush it. They consistently convert time into assets instead of expenses. Over years, this conversion compounds, and one day the pressure lifts. The tragedy, experts say, is that most people never realize what held them back. They blame the job, the economy, the timing. Rarely do they question the assumption that time should always be sold. But once that assumption breaks, possibilities appear. The time misunderstanding isn't about working less, it's about working differently. Using time to build something that eventually gives time back. That is the difference between income and independence. And understanding that difference is where financial ceilings begin to disappear. Most people believe that avoiding risk is responsible. They believe that stability comes from caution, that safety comes from predictability, and that financial security comes from never making mistakes. Financial experts say this belief feels sensible, but it's also one of the most quietly destructive ideas in personal finance, because avoiding risk doesn't eliminate danger, it often concentrates it. Experts define risk differently than most people expect. Risk is not just losing money. Risk is also losing time, losing opportunity, losing flexibility. When people avoid all uncertainty, they often accept one massive risk instead. Dependence on a single income, dependence on a single employer, dependence on systems they don't control. Experts say this form of risk feels safe because it's familiar, but familiarity is not protection. One of the most common financial patterns experts observe is this: people accept low-risk decisions daily while exposing themselves to high-risk outcomes long-term. They avoid investing because markets fluctuate. They avoid learning because it feels uncertain. They avoid change because it feels unstable. Meanwhile, inflation quietly erodes savings. Skills become outdated. Opportunities disappear. Experts say this is not risk avoidance. It's risk mismanagement. The risk myth is reinforced early. From a young age, people are taught to avoid mistakes, avoid failure, avoid loss. Success is framed as staying within safe boundaries. Experts don't criticize this mindset for survival. They criticize it for wealth building, because wealth is not built inside guaranteed outcomes. It's built by managing uncertainty intelligently. One of the most uncomfortable expert insights is this: the biggest financial risk most people take is never learning how to take risk. They assume that playing it safe is neutral. It isn't. Doing nothing is a decision. Staying still has consequences, and over time, those consequences compound. Experts often highlight how people misunderstand investment risk. They focus on short-term fluctuations, daily market movement, temporary losses, volatility, but they ignore long-term certainty, inflation, currency dilution, rising costs. Experts say long-term certainty is more dangerous than short-term volatility because it works silently. Another reason the risk myth persists is because losses feel personal. A loss feels like failure. A mistake feels like incompetence. Experts say this emotional framing prevents learning. Wealthy individuals view losses differently. Not as judgments, but as feedback, information, data that improves future decisions. Experts also note that people often confuse risk with discomfort. Learning feels uncomfortable. Starting feels uncomfortable. Investing feels uncomfortable. Avoiding these feelings feels safe, but discomfort is not danger. It's often a sign of growth. One of the clearest differences experts see between wealthy and struggling individuals is how they define safety. Struggling individuals define safety as avoiding loss. Wealthy individuals define safety as adaptability, the ability to adjust, to pivot, to recover. Experts emphasize that adaptability reduces risk more effectively than avoidance ever could. Another overlooked aspect of the risk myth is time horizon. Short time horizons make risk feel terrifying. When outcomes must be immediate, uncertainty feels unacceptable. Long time horizons change everything. Experts say time absorbs volatility. What looks risky in months often looks predictable over decades. This is why wealthy individuals think long-term by default. They give decisions room to breathe. Experts also point out that people tend to take the wrong risks. They risk comfort instead of capital. They risk stress instead of effort. They avoid financial risk but accept emotional exhaustion. They avoid investing but accept burnout. Experts say this trade is irrational, but common. The risk myth is also amplified by stories. People hear about failures more than successes. Losses are dramatic. Caution is praised. Quiet compounding is invisible. Experts say this distorts perception. It makes risk look reckless, even when it's calculated. One of the most powerful expert observations is this: wealthy individuals don't eliminate risk. They redefine it, they spread it, they manage it, they enter it intentionally. They don't bet everything on one outcome. They build multiple paths. This reduces total exposure. Experts often describe wealth building as a sequence of small, survivable risks, not one massive leap. Small investments, skill acquisition, side projects, calculated experiments, each carries limited downside. Together, they create upside. Another reason people avoid risk is lack of margin. When finances are tight, any loss feels catastrophic. Experts emphasize that this is why saving and risk-taking are connected. Savings create tolerance for uncertainty. Without margin, people are forced into caution, which keeps them trapped. Experts also note that people often wait for certainty that never arrives. Perfect timing, perfect information, guaranteed outcomes, but certainty is expensive, and it usually arrives too late. Those who wait for it often miss the opportunity entirely. One of the most damaging aspects of the risk myth is how it delays action. People plan endlessly. Research forever, prepare indefinitely. Experts say preparation is valuable, but preparation without execution becomes avoidance, and avoidance feels productive while accomplishing nothing. Experts emphasize that failure is not the opposite of success. Inaction is. Failure provides information. Inaction preserves ignorance. Wealth grows through iteration. Try, adjust, improve. Avoiding all risk eliminates this process. The risk myth also affects how people think about age. Young people delay investing because they feel inexperienced. Older people avoid it because they feel it's too late. Experts say both groups misunderstand time. The risk of delay often outweighs the risk of action at every stage. Breaking the risk myth requires reframing. Risk is not something to eliminate, it's something to price. What is the worst-case outcome? Can you survive it? Can you learn from it? If the answer is yes, the risk is often acceptable. Experts agree on one principle. Wealth is built by those who take calculated risks early, while others wait for guarantees. Over time, the gap becomes irreversible. The risk myth keeps people financially frozen. It convinces them that safety lies in stillness. But experts say true safety lies in movement, intentional, informed, and controlled. Understanding risk doesn't make decisions easy. It makes them honest, and honesty is the foundation of financial progress. Most people believe wealth is built through discipline, willpower, self-control, good intentions repeated every day. Financial experts say this belief sounds reasonable, but it's also deeply flawed because discipline is unreliable. And wealth, by definition, requires consistency. Experts often describe discipline as a limited resource. It fades under stress. It weakens under fatigue. It disappears when life becomes busy. Relying on discipline means relying on a version of yourself that shows up perfectly every day. That version rarely exists, which is why experts say most people don't fail financially because they don't know what to do. They fail because they expect themselves to do it manually, forever. The quiet wealth rule is simple but uncomfortable. Wealthy people don't rely on discipline. They remove the need for it. They design systems that make good decisions automatic and bad decisions inconvenient. Not dramatic systems, not complicated ones, quiet ones. Financial experts observe that wealthy individuals treat self-control as a weakness, not a strength. They assume they will be distracted. They assume they will get tired. They assume they will make emotional decisions, so they plan around it. Instead of trusting motivation, they build structure. One of the most common mistakes experts see is people trying to be better with money through intention alone. They promise to save what's left. They promise to invest later. They promise to track spending next month. Experts say promises are fragile. Systems are not. The quiet wealth rule starts with separation. Money meant for the future is separated from money meant for today. Different accounts, different rules, different access. When money is out of sight, it stops competing with impulse. Experts emphasize that visibility drives spending. Accessibility invites decisions. Distance creates protection. Wealthy individuals often automate what others attempt manually. Savings are automatic. Investments are automatic. Bills are predictable. This removes daily negotiation. There is no debate, no internal conflict, no decision fatigue. Money moves according to rules set long ago, not moods felt today. Experts also point out that wealthy people design their lives to reduce temptation. They don't constantly test themselves. They don't browse endlessly. They don't surround themselves with spending triggers. They don't rely on restraint. They limit exposure, not because they lack desire, but because they understand psychology. Another part of the quiet wealth rule is reducing complexity. More accounts, more decisions, more choices. Complexity increases mistakes. Wealthy individuals simplify aggressively. Fewer subscriptions, clear budgets, predictable systems. Experts say simplicity compounds just like money does. One of the most powerful expert observations is this: wealthy people rarely ask, "Can I afford this?" They ask, "Does this fit the system?" If it doesn't, the decision is already made. No emotion required. Experts also emphasize the importance of default behavior. Humans follow defaults. If saving is optional, it won't happen consistently. If investing is manual, it will be delayed. If spending is easy, it will expand. Wealthy individuals flip the defaults. Saving happens first. Investing happens automatically. Spending happens last. This one shift changes everything. Another quiet rule experts observe is that wealthy people avoid decision frequency. They don't decide to save every month. They decide once, then let automation handle the rest. Decision frequency drains energy. Reducing it preserves consistency. The quiet wealth rule also applies to lifestyle. Wealthy individuals don't constantly upgrade. They set a lifestyle ceiling. Income can rise. Lifestyle stays relatively stable. The gap becomes surplus. Surplus becomes leverage. Experts say this is one of the most reliable predictors of long-term wealth. Another misconception experts address is the idea that automation removes control. In reality, it increases it. Manual systems feel flexible. But flexibility invites drift. Automated systems enforce intention. They protect long-term goals from short-term impulses. Experts also highlight that wealthy individuals review systems, not emotions. They don't ask, "How do I feel about my finances?" They ask, "Is the system still working?" If not, they adjust rules, not habits. One of the most overlooked aspects of the quiet wealth rule is invisibility. Wealthy people don't constantly talk about money. They don't celebrate every win. They don't broadcast discipline. Because their systems don't require attention, they run quietly in the background. Experts say this invisibility is why wealth often looks effortless from the outside. People assume it comes from income or intelligence. They don't see the years of structure quietly operating underneath. The quiet wealth rule also protects against burnout. When finances are predictable, stress decreases. When stress decreases, decisions improve. When decisions improve, systems strengthen. This creates a positive loop. Experts emphasize that motivation fades but structure persists. Anyone can be disciplined for a week. Few can be disciplined for decades, but systems don't get tired. The most powerful insight experts share is this: people who build wealth don't fight themselves. They design around themselves. They accept human limitations and plan accordingly. Breaking free financially doesn't require becoming a different person. It requires removing daily friction from doing the right thing. That is the quiet wealth rule. Not effort, not intensity, not perfection, structure. And once structure is in place, wealth becomes boring, predictable, inevitable. After income, comfort, time, risk, and discipline, financial experts all arrive at the same conclusion. The reason most people stay broke is not lack of effort, it's not lack of intelligence, and it's not even lack of opportunity. It's the way they frame money itself. Experts call this the final shift, because once it happens, everything changes quietly and permanently. Most people see money as something to be used, earn it, spend it, replace it. Money is treated like fuel. When it runs out, more is needed. Financial experts say this framing keeps people trapped in a loop because fuel is consumed, and consumption never builds independence. Wealthy individuals see money differently. They don't see it as something to use. They see it as something to position. Position to reduce future effort. Position to protect future time. Position to expand future choice. This is the expert shift. Money stops being a reward for work. It becomes a tool that replaces work. Experts often describe this shift as moving from active thinking to structural thinking. Active thinking focuses on actions. How much can I earn? How much can I save this month? What should I cut? Structural thinking focuses on systems. What decisions repeat automatically? What happens without my attention? Where does money flow by default? This shift removes emotion from money, and emotion is where most financial damage happens. One of the clearest signs the expert shift has occurred is how people react to increases in income. Most people expand life. Wealth-oriented individuals expand margin. They increase buffers. They increase flexibility. They increase distance between income and obligation. Experts say margin is the true indicator of wealth, not lifestyle, not appearance. Margin, the expert shift, also changes how people interpret success. Success is no longer spending more, it's needing less, it's having the option to say no, to pause, to choose differently. Experts emphasize that choice is the real dividend of wealth. Another major change experts observe is how people think about time. Before the shift, time is traded. After the shift, time is protected. Decisions are evaluated by how they affect future freedom, not short-term comfort. Money that buys convenience but increases dependency is rejected. Money that buys resilience is prioritized. Experts also say this shift changes how people view risk. Before, risk is avoided. After, risk is managed. People stop asking, "What if this fails?" They ask, "What happens if I never start?" This reframing unlocks progress. One of the most important expert insights is that the shift doesn't require drastic action. It requires consistency, not perfection, not intensity, consistency, small systems, repeated decisions, long-time horizons. Experts emphasize that wealth grows quietly once the shift is made. There are no fireworks, just steady improvement. The expert shift also changes emotional relationships with money. Guilt fades, anxiety decreases. Urgency disappears, money becomes neutral, a resource, not a judgment. Experts say neutrality is critical because emotion clouds judgment. Another hallmark of the expert shift is patience. People stop rushing outcomes. They stop chasing shortcuts. They understand that time is an ally if used early and consistently. This patience compounds. Experts often say the most dangerous moment financially is when someone feels almost there, almost comfortable, almost stable, almost successful, because complacency freezes progress. The expert shift prevents this by keeping attention on systems, not feelings. One of the final observations experts share is this: people who build wealth rarely feel rich while doing it. They feel calm. Calm because systems are working. Calm because pressure is low. Calm because options exist. Wealth reveals itself slowly, often when it's no longer the main focus. The expert shift is not about rejecting modern life. It's about intentional participation, choosing which comforts are worth paying for, choosing which risks are worth taking, choosing which efforts are worth repeating. Everything else is noise. Experts agree that most people don't fail financially. They drift. They drift into comfort. They drift into dependence. They drift into routines that feel harmless. The expert shift interrupts drift. It replaces it with direction. And here is the quiet truth experts return to again and again. Money doesn't change people. It reveals the systems they live by. Change the system, and the outcome follows. The people who escape financial stress are rarely louder, smarter, or luckier. They simply make the shift earlier. They stop asking how to earn more. They start asking how to need less effort tomorrow than they do today. And once that question becomes the default, everything else aligns. This is why the wealthy don't talk about money the way everyone else does. They don't obsess over income. They don't chase trends. They don't rely on discipline. They rely on structure, and structure, quietly applied over time, always wins. Wealth rarely announces itself. It doesn't arrive through noise, urgency, or dramatic change. It arrives quietly through systems, patience, and decisions most people never notice. If this perspective felt different, it's because it's the way financial experts actually think, not the way money is usually sold. This channel exists for those who prefer clarity over chaos, structure over motivation, and long-term control over short-term comfort. If that resonates, subscribe to Capital Lux, not for daily hype, not for trends, but for calm, intelligent insights into money, wealth, and the rules rarely explained out loud. Watch slowly, think carefully, and return when you're ready to see money differently. Until then, stay precise.